biographical theatre, and we're going to ask what that is later on. We're going to ask what theatre is. Just going to keep tumbling it back, and because all of us, I've worked with you all before, I always have that interrogation always going on. What is a piece of theatre? What is a piece of theatre? What is entertaining? What's writing mean? Every single time I go back to making something new, I keep asking myself these questions to make sure I'm vibrant and that I'm constantly learning, because I don't know all the rules. If I did, I'd be supremely rich. So we are going to go back over some of the stuff that we've done before. Right, I'm going to use a couple of projects as case studies throughout. As I'm sure you know, I probably said this before. So I made my first real biographical piece was about a woman who was obsessed with Julie Andrews, which is Julie Maddy Deeply, done really well. Then I made a devised piece about two boys who are obsessed with the Cray twins. Then I made my Bobby Kennedy experience. And then I'm now making a show about the third class on the Titanic. And this is going to be my next one-person show, because I wanted to make another one-man show. And I've always been fascinated with the Titanic, but I really don't want to tell any more posh stories. I just want to know about the third class. And then I started digging deeper, and I was like, oh, I really want to make this show now. So I will shunt up against my third class, it's called. I will shunt up against this occasion because I'm still in the process at the moment. I haven't actually started anything but research. So I'm going to unpack that, but also unpack some of the ways that I built the other show. So An Evening Without Kate Bush is another one. And I'll keep unpacking those each time we move on. Okay, so we kind of have your who answered, don't we? Or your what or your when. If you need to make a note about the decade, think about the decades now, maybe think about the years that you'd like to explore. Is it in a specific time? Is it in the past? Is it in the future? You're going to reboot it, kind of know where you're coming from, I think. So I know currently with Third Class, that's the name of the show that I'm making, it is going to be period. I suspect, knowing me, I will try and blow the wheels off the cart at some point and bring it right into the room at 21st century. But for the most part, I know that I'm going to be playing one person. I'm going to be probably covered in mud or something. I know that I'm going to walk on with a big kind of like bag. I can't remember the name of it. You like the old kit bag that a World War I soldier would have. And I know that. That's as much as I know. And I kind of maybe know his name. And I know that it's going to be set definitely, obviously, on the Titanic, but I'm most certainly going to explore afterwards. And even though the character I'm playing is going to die, I'm also interested in him commentating on what has happened since the Titanic went down. I haven't got my vehicle for that yet, but that's kind of what I know already. So just think about it when you go into a project, even before you start reading, it's like, what do you know already? What do you know? Where's the burning, the coming from? Where is it? And I knew it was Third Class. I knew that I wanted to hold our audience now, the 21st century audience. I kind of want to hold them to ransom a little bit. I want to hold us to ransom because we keep talking about the first class and maybe the middle class on the Titanic. It's always about Guggenheim, always about Isidore, lying on the bed and drowning themselves because they didn't want to go on a boat. All this type of stuff is always those stories, and very rarely. And now I've got this wonderful book and I'm into the third class. You're like, oh my God, they're so much more interesting. Blah, 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 that's to come. Right, so that's that. So think about who is burning you now, who is calling you into making this story. And I do believe it's actually the character, that's the question is framed at. Not that I just want to make the show, but it's like, what is it that's calling you out to make your piece? So moving on to the why now of your project, where you must answer, what is it? It literally is as clear as that question is. It's like, why now? Why are you doing this project now? So if you want to scribble anything down as I'm nattering away, feel free. Now, the Kate Bush show, to use the example of my work, I had known for 7 or 8 years after I made the Julie Andrews show. I was asked again, would I do anything similar? And Kate Bush just came out my mouth. I didn't know anything else apart from that, because it was a no-brainer. And my dad brought me up on Kate Bush music, and I was like, yeah, of course, that makes sense. But I didn't know what, how, blah, 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 blah. And then it was in 2014 or something. Bizarrely, we started to make it, or at least talk about it, start to give it some form. And then Kate Bush decided to tour again after 25 years of being away from the stage. So we had to stop that project because it was useless. It wasn't answering the why now anymore, because she was back, and it wasn't expected that she'd ever be back. And then years and years passed, and we moved forward to 2019. And Sarah Louise Young and I, we just were in that professional space of like, actually, we have time now. This seems really right. And we were living down the road from each other in London. It's like, yeah, everything seems to be aligned. And then by the time we got into it, and we wrote her biography, the best one. And it was a case of, you know what? We don't want to tell Kate Bush's story because Kate Bush is incredibly private and nobody knows what her story is. And that's great. And so it took a while for us to realize that, because, you know, we know that she likes Marmite. We know that she likes cooking vegetables in Marmite. We know that nobody knew she had a kid until 12 years after she had a kid. We know that she does the school run. We know that she likes doing the washing. You know, if you listen to some of her music and stuff, and you're like, yep, she's a mum. She's pretty regular. Yep, that's it. But obviously, she's the most incredible artist. And she doesn't care when she releases an album. It doesn't matter if it takes 10 years. She wants to get it right. So after a while, we realized, you know what? It has to be about her music and nothing else. And it has to be about the effect her music has on us. And that's where the show came in. So we kind of answered it. Well, in some ways, Kate told us what to do, because it was like, I'm not telling you anything, sort out your own show. And so we decided that we would make the show about the fans. And if you ever see it or come to a town near you, if not already, the reason is called An Evening Without Kate Bush, because we don't even mention her in the show. And we gave ourselves that challenge because we don't need to say her name. And she's not there. And the idea is what we did, we then harvested fans' ideas, inspirations, YouTube comments, our experiences, friends' experiences of her music or whatever, and made it into a form which we call a show. And then obviously all of the music is weaved inside it. And it is a cabaret because it's interactive, there's audience talking, all sorts of stuff. And now I think because the shows seems to have, obviously because of all the lockdowns and pandemic, etc., theatre people are coming back. But what's happened is there is a trend, and a couple of producers have told me this, that shows that include an interaction are selling better. Now, we could probably do with unpacking that ourselves at one point, but I believe it's because people want to connect or reconnect or be back in a room with this type of like live audience communion that goes on in these places. So what's happened with An Evening Without Kate Bush is this is the type of show you can sing along to. And when you've been, you know, you hear the, you know, middle class, fairly rich theatre complaining that audiences are singing along. I'm like, oh yes, because you're playing ABBA songs. Yes, because you're playing Tina Turner songs. I'm sorry, that's the Faustian pact you've made to, you know, skin and eat profit off of people. Fuck you. Tina Turner is a great singer and they want to sing along. And I hated it when the musical put a sign outside the door saying, we've advised you not to sing along. It's like, no, it's a musical and you're flirting with gig concerts. This is the way it goes. And so ironically, and even that Kate Bush has actually found its space, or the audience have found it. And I now look back and I go, yeah, that's what it was. It was about communion, because Kate Bush fans don't get to meet or see Kate Bush. So what do? They come together and they commune around that, around the totem pole of her. And one day, hopefully she comes back and we'll all bow at the church, you know? And that's where it's coming from. That's why we answered the why now. And then my Titanic project is why now? Because I'm passionate that these stories haven't been told before. And I think that the class system is being felt probably deeper now in the UK. And I'd like to shine a light back on the past. And when I think about it, there's a theme here, because Bobby Kennedy is not JFK. And I'm not interested in JFK. I'm interested in RFK because he was a more learned and more interesting politician. And a lot of people don't know that he was also assassinated. So there's a very much a theme, obviously, in my brain, which is I want to shine a light on an area we've either forgotten about or don't know anything about, or that we should pay attention to, which is my why now, as it were. Georgie, could you just for the room, could you be our little case study for this question? Why now for you?
I've just been scribbling stuff down as you were talking. Um, there are a few reasons.
Mhm.
Um, for me, partly it's because the reason she got into the reason she ended up with the career she did is because of the way she was treated as an ill and injured child. You know, I'll sit over there and learn to draw. And it does have parallels with how disabled people and chronically ill people are still treated now. So there's that I wanted to explore, but also Medway. Well, one particular bit of Medway, but Medway as a whole is in the top 0.4% of the most deprived areas of the UK, and people here feel like crap. There's no hope. Yeah, you walk around the towns and you can see it. Nobody cares anymore. Nobody thinks that they can ever amount to anything because they live here. And I just, this is the one I want to start with, but I want to pull up, you know, obviously like more recent as well, but historical stories of success. You know, look, and it's always been a fairly naff area. You know, but it didn't used to stop us. So why are we letting it stop us now? I'm more interested. I've sort of gone against what I thought would happen, and I'm more interested in working with sort of older teens and young adults now, or not even older teens, because that's really the point at which you can get in there and inspire that change nice and early before they end up, you know, despondent and having to work back from there. But I think it would be good for everyone that lives here to be reminded, you know, reminded to be told these stories. Yeah, actually, these are the people that came from here. Look at what they did. You know, we can do it as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like a camaraderie, kinship, connection.
Yeah, I mean,
It's almost a social project.
it is, and just to, you know, a little bit of local pride. I'm not from Medway. I'm from Gravesend, which has an even worse reputation, but actually isn't quite as bad. But it's this, you know, it's that kind of it's a town that's lost its main purpose. You know, we used to have the dockyard, which was the biggest employer for the whole of Medway, closed in 1986, I think. The Victory was built there. You know, it was huge, and since that closed, the area has just gradually died, and it feels like it's never really recovered from that.
You just said a sentence which really rung true with me. Historical stories of success. That sounds like a tagline for a show. So
Yeah.
maybe make a note of that if that rings true for you. But it's historical stories of success is a kind of a good producer to the root of the story. Historical stories of success. That's kind of a sentence that would, you know, maybe would pique my interest. Okay, right. So let's move on. So who's your audience? Again, it's never, you know, is it the horse or the cart, the chicken and the egg? I don't really know, but and you'll always be surprised which one comes first. But I have learned a lot through Kennedy that it isn't just the audience I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be, for the most part, over 55s. And I've started to have more people under 25, which was quite a surprise. So maybe think about your audience first, your core audience as well. Like, who is this going to sell tickets? Because as all of you know, I always pound that drum that you've got to sell tickets. You can't just open your show and hope that something happens. So, and it's the same if you open a business, you will be asked by a bank to do your market research, which I've got some coming up now. But it is really, really useful for you to say, now, who do you think is going to come and see this show? Just to see where your brain is at. And although it may be an obvious question, but I think I ask it every single time because I want to sell tickets. And my audience is going to be anybody for this, because I've done a bit of stalking on Facebook. I've joined every single Titanic group you can possibly imagine. And because people who like Titanic are called Titanaracks. I most certainly subscribe to, not in the way some people are like, but so I found that, you know, the age range is just who knows with the Titanic, because it's such a unbelievable event and historical, and, you know, whatever you feel about the 1997 film, it's incredibly impactful. So that's useful now, and I've learned a lot by touring Black Box Studios with Kennedy. I'm about to go on the rural tour in 10 days' time, and that's into village halls and town halls and stuff. And I've realized that I can repeat that pattern. I can go back to those theaters because the audience is there. But I think actually my third class project will sell more than Kennedy has sold, because Titanic has a little bit more of a British spirit in it. And that's fair to say. That's absolutely fair to say, because Bobby Kennedy is American and he's slightly a politician. And I've learned that. And what I'm going to then do is try and partner them together. So every time I take the third class show out, I'm going to suggest they put the Kennedy show on the next night. And then hopefully they can kind of sell it as a historical two-nighter or something with the same performer. And then that way it's a lot easier to sell. So yeah, definitely know who your audience is, or at least start to interrogate who they are as soon as possible. Okay. And now I'm just going to show a couple of images here. This is kind of going back to my why now, because I'm actually driven a little bit angry by the 1997 Titanic film a little bit. I remember when I watched it, I come out and thought, this was beautiful. It was really well done, but I really did not need Jack and Rose, because they're fictional characters. And I knew, not so much now, but I was so obsessed with the stories that were going on and the scandals that were going on the Titanic. I didn't need this other story about trying to find a necklace. But I get that that's cinema. I get that's Hollywood. I get that it works, blah, 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 whatever. But with my project, because in theory, every piece of theatre is a political act or a social political act, I want to remind people or refresh or start to tell people other stories. And I think that will be a nice little new spin on the Titanic, folklore, as it were. And so I've started to look at class and research that, etc., etc. But all the time, in some ways, my big, massive quest is to undo Titanic 1997. Because I want teenagers to go, where was Jack and Rose? Like, they don't exist. Okay, anyway. And then there's a reason I put this image up, because I think with the Titanic, it's almost like a campfire song, a campfire story. And I want to use that element in what I'm making. Again, I can't be too coherent yet, but these are just some of my random thoughts that I've had. There's almost like a campfire quality to what I'm going to make. I've started to see that the show is probably going to be in the round where possible. So I've just been in Bath at the Rondo Theatre and did Bobby Kennedy there. And I spoke to the AD who runs it, and he wants to have the Titanic project next autumn. And I said to him, I said, would you put this in the round? And he was like, yeah, definitely. So hopefully anybody who takes me can make me enable me to do it in the round, because I think there's something about it because of the way the Titanic folklore is told as well. You go onto the Facebook pages and you see, if somebody puts a photo up, suddenly thousands of comments appear, and they'll all start arguing about which was true and what was untrue. And I find that fascinating. This kind of, like, I don't know, authority over something that happened so long ago. And where have they got that from? Books, and all sorts. And there's fascinating stuff out there. So it's kind of like a campfire quality to what I want to make, and also use that feeling. Okay, so can you just give your show a little bit of a working title? Or if you have your title already, it doesn't matter. You just call it show 1, 2, 3, whatever you like. Now I'm going to read you mine. Because I'm going to get you to write a 4-line copy, 4 lines only. But here's mine so far. Haven't done it yet. Approximately 1,517 people died on the Titanic. Nearly half of those were third class. This brand new show tells the story of the third class passengers, the ones we rarely hear about. Third class weaves the lesser known stories into a journey you think you know. I'm going to play with that still. That's not perfect. So have a go at that. 4 lines maximum. And don't make them read along lines. just try to 4 line. Write your show copy now before you've made it. A couple of minutes.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, just start to edit that down a little bit so it's readable. We'll have a quick read around the Zoom room. Okay, Robert, give us your
Hello.
give us your title and your show copy, albeit working and rough.
Okay. Well, I think I already said my working title is JB. I'm not sure if he was a Scotch drinker or not. Okay. A man who spoke truth to power. Churchill told the BBC to drop his wartime broadcasts. They were becoming more popular than Churchill's own speeches.
Nice. No, that's good. You know what I got from that? I learned. I didn't know. That's really good. Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Cool. Fabulous. Thank you. Jane?
Okay, my working title is Bruise, and Bruise tells the story of child abuse and its sanitation through music and theatre.
Just read one more time for me.
Okay, Bruise, it tells the story of child abuse and its sanitation through music and theatre.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't know if you ever do YouTube, but I did an interview with a young student about 2 years ago, and she was talking about that the universities are getting students to tell their trauma stories, but our universities equipped to deal with that process?
Yeah, wow.
It's a thing to interrogate. It really is a thing to interrogate. You know, how do you tell this story? Like, can you do it? Can you do it? Can you do it? You know, what are the mechanisms, safeguarding, blah blah blah, etc.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you, Georgie.
Botanicals. Sickly and impaired, banned from sport and exercise, encouraged towards art, a new life flourished and grew. Botanicals explores the life of Anne Pratt, one of the first female illustrators to be published within the field, and all from humble beginnings in Medway.
Of course, yeah, she's local, isn't she? Yeah. What year? What was the years that she? What was her?
She was born in 1806, and I think she died late 1850s. I think maybe 1860s.
Okay.
But yeah, she did the classic thing of escaping to London. They all did, but
Yeah. Okay.
But it's that I wanted the focus to be on the fact that she's from here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely. All right. So just one thing to check. Has your show been done before? Because obviously there are lots of Kate Bush acts out in the UK. Now, this is something to check because there's that old adage of there's no such thing as a new idea. So take the main kind of thread. Robert, I'd say JB Priestley, really check this one out, because you've got to make sure nobody's done what you're trying to do to a point. Now, not, of course, there's space for everyone. Now, what we have with An Evening about Kate Bush is it's not a tribute act, but there are quite a few tribute acts out there of Kate Bush. And what I was interested in was actually like taking the kind of approach of a tribute act and ripping it up and mucking around with it. Because if I ever saw a tribute act, which is very rare, I generally thought, well, you're just recreating what that, you know, the group has done, which is fair play. A lot of people do that. And there was this theatre, I can't remember where it was. There was a theatre which was actually a concert gig venue, which is devoted to tribute acts, and there's a documentary about them. And I just loved it. I thought, oh, this is so great. Like, people just get to go to places and they can see Led Zeppelin again, you know, Pink Floyd, whatever. And, you know, everybody's effort and love was so, so rich. And I thought, I want to kind of, where else can I take that kind of concept, which started to, and then we went to watch another tribute kind of act, an American 4-piece female actor muso tribute to Kate Bush in Hackney. It was incredible. And then when Wuthering Heights came on at the end, this was the moment I knew what we needed to make. You couldn't hear the singers singing the song because the audience took over. And that was like, there it is. That's what it was. That's what it was. I didn't know that's what it was, but it was like, yes, it's actually about the people who want to go back and see or witness, or, you know, whatever. So that's what makes our show different to the other ones that are out there, although they share the same space. And it's taken a while for us to convince theatres that we're not a tribute act. Thankfully, the audience are actually putting their arms around our show and teaching the theatres that this is what we want to see. It's the same way with Les Mis. You know, Les Mis was panned by the critics, but the public love it. And so, you know, the show wins, right? So thankfully, we're now going up next year to 300-seater venues, and it's just building and building and building. And the Kate Bush tribute acts are still there. You know, and we've met them. They come and see our show. So there's space for everybody. But what you've got to do is know if there's something out there that's similar. Most certainly check it out. You know, by hook or by crook, just go and see it, or go and, you know, and also film and television, documentaries, anything. And it doesn't necessarily specifically need to be about your topic. It could be about your decade that you're exploring, or has that character, as that person or that thread been in something else? Where else has this person been? With Bobby Kennedy, mostly documentaries and mostly vintage footage, because he's a little bit in the shadow of JFK. There is a film, it's awful, it's called Bobby, and it was made by Emilio Estevez, and for some reason he made the decision that Bobby would only be in the background, and he would just focus on the hotel staff where Bobby was killed. And it was the worst decision ever, because what he did was he then faked everybody's stories in the hotel. I was like, why am I watching this? You know, it just doesn't make any sense. So as JFK, there is a film called JFK, but there isn't one called BFK yet. But yeah, so know there, if there is your creative twin out there, because somebody's always thought about it. A friend of mine is about to make a show about James Whale, the very famous director from Frankenstein. And I just said to him, I said, make it as soon as possible, because James Whale is one of those hidden gems in the British lexicon. We always forget. And he's responsible for Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, immense theatre career. And he was gay and he didn't care. Who knew in the 1920s, which is like, whoa, that's incredible. That story needs to be told. And yeah, so please know who your twin is. Has it been done before? Okay, and moving forward to visualize our project a little bit more. Where does your show live? I think now, with my financial means, I know that I'm better off with the box office split, which I've touched on with most of you, I imagine. The box office split deal. Remember, always 60-40, never take 50-50. Refuse and say this is unusual. I would prefer to go with the regular 60-40. Some venues will try to 50-50. Say no. They'll back off straight away because it's irregular. And the lovely Rondo Theatre are 70-30. They're beautiful. They really support artists. So yeah, where does it live? And it took me a while to realize that Bobby Kennedy will be fine in the Village Hall. And bizarrely, because of the concrete issue that happened in the past month, Whitchurch Town Hall I was supposed to be in, I'm now going to be in Whitchurch Cricket Club the week after. And the organizer saying, you're going to be all right. It's a snooker room. I was like, listen, seriously, move the table, put the chairs out. I'll use my Bluetooth speaker. It's fine, because it's about telling the story. And also, those people have paid a ticket. They wanted to come and see this show. It's like, let's do it. It doesn't matter. You know, because I've learned that Bobby Kennedy is lovely with lights. At Bath, couple of weeks ago, I had this wonderful stage that had made a massive mess. We had lights and everything. Everything was, you know, bells and whistles, but it won't be like that in 2 weeks. But it doesn't matter because it's about the story. It's about the performance and taking people away and retelling people, you know, the story of Bobby, etc. So, and I know that my piece will not work, Kennedy, in a 100 plus. It wouldn't work. I don't want it to be there because it's too small, and I mean that with love, because I've made it small on purpose. It's just, you know, it's me, a box, load of paper, and some music, and a suit. And so really, really think about now where your show should go, because it will affect your making process. Because remember, you always want to put this on. This is going on, right? Otherwise, why do it? You're going to do this. This is going to go on. So then when your producer brain goes, right, where's it going to go? And I find that festivals are really, really useful. Latitude, especially. Latitude's got a lovely theatre thread, and you know, like Pulse, I've just put that Pulse Ipswich Festival. They're most certainly into new writing. But have a search around, and then the Rural Touring Forum, which I think I probably spoke to you all about before. But anyway, Google Rural Touring Forum, and you will find which Arts Council kind of initiative is around your area. And for the most part, what you do is, when you kind of have your show 75% nearly ready, you then either send it to them or you'll find a portal on their website. You start to get them interested in your project, and they'll give you an application form, and you fill in the application form. Remember, you've kind of got a lot of your show by now. You send it off, and then you cross all your fingers, and then they'll either say, yeah, we'd like to put that onto our library, actually. And then you might get invited to go and do a little 20-minute skit of it in front of all of the programs in the region. So I did that with Kennedy back in April, and I was asked to go to a village hall in South Shropshire, and I walked in, and I couldn't believe it. There were 10 other theatre companies in there, and the room was filled with 100 programmers and bookers from the village halls all in Shropshire. It was wonderful. And I did Bob Kennedy, and I got 4 bookings out of it. And then I got asked to go to the main rural touring network in Shrewsbury, which is to all of them in the UK. Did my 20 minutes of Bobby, and from out of that I've got more dates, and I've got I'm now on a festival in Hastings next year, and I've got teaching gigs out of it at the London College of Music. So it's really useful to get into that ecosystem, because once you've got in, you can then say, oh, I've got another show coming up soon, and they'll go, oh yeah, we want you back because we loved your last show. And then you take the other one back. And then obviously the brilliantness of those type of initiatives is you get paid full whack. You don't have to fund anything. In fact, in some ways, you don't always have to market it, because the marketing team do it for you. You have a conversation with them for sure. But for the most part, you find out what the price is for your show. So for full transparency, I need to remember this now. Bobby Kennedy is £780 per show, but that includes my stage manager, their fee, my fee, travel to where I'm going, and accommodation, plus any other sort of extra blah. Now, Totocam, my show's 3 years old now, so a lot of stuff I've already been paid back, a lot of my stuff. But I'm staying at my cousin's, so that takes out my accommodation. And I bought the train tickets really early. So now I'm like, yes, the more I plan, the more I hustle, I get to take home more money. And they're fine. They don't ever ask you what you do with it. You just have to factor it in. And the producer in you will go, right, I know how to save money because I'm going to stay at a friend of a friend's, etc. Okay. So yeah, I'd highly advise you to look at the Rural Touring Network, and almost, dare I say it, make it for the Rural Touring Network, which is make it small, make it travelable, and suddenly you'll just have a production on, and you won't have had to have the financial impact in whatever way. Okay. I will do questions soon, but we're going to do these now. Now, you all know this one. Number 1, have a go at answering that. What do you want to discuss? Normally, I would take it down further and further and further. Say, what do you really want to discuss? What do you really, really, really want to discuss? But just a couple of words. Write down a couple of words. What do you want to discuss? And make it kind of one word. So I want to discuss on Titanic, class, death, stories, arrogance. have a think about what you want to discuss. Then we'll go around the room this time. We'll keep it tight just because of the time, because we've already nearly hit the hour, believe it or not. So if you could just tell us your couple of words. Robert, do you want to start? Are you prepped?
Yeah, I thought one word was challenging, and then challenging the class system.
Yeah.
Because I think Priestley knew how to talk to what are slightly missaid ordinary people.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Brilliant. Yes, Jane.
I haven't really answered your questions yet,
That's
but
right.
but what I want to discuss is basically pretty well what I've already just said to you. So I'm going back to the child abuse and historically and through fiction and through fiction, drama, theatre, whatever, and what is my first deep dive in research target? I'm not sure yet. I'm really not sure.
Okay.
I'm actually, one of the things I wanted to do, because it started with Peter Grimes, I really want to read, although I've heard Peter Grimes, I want to read the libretto because it's the words from that I think are very interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's right. I put down abuse and fiction and theatre.
Fiction, yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. Brilliant. George, what have you got?
I have got disability, success, small town, and I put feminism, but I don't necessarily mean that. Potentially the rise of feminism, but it's all that kind of era when it was, women were starting to say, actually, no. So, and there is that element with her being the first woman to be published in that field, or that sort of thing. So it's not feminism, but it sort of is.
Yeah.
It's the thought.
Kind of societal elements were going on the time as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Just number 2. This is we won't share everything because of time, but list your first deep dive research targets. So I'll just share some of mine to send you on your way if that helps. Books are always my first, usually academic books. So I have one which is not in reach, but there's only one book on the 3rd class of the Titanic. Of course, there is only one book. And I've got that from America, from a professor who wrote that 7 or 8 years ago. And he is meticulous on every single person, on every single episode. It's brilliant. So books are always my first kind of jump into the unknown. So have a go at thinking about what some of your first deep dive research targets could be. Could be music. And photos. And this is more of a shopping list for you later on. Could be documentaries on class. Jane, I wonder if yours is documentaries on how musicals are made.
It could
Or are
be.
you zooming out? Like, think, how do you actually make a musical? The history of Oliver the musical. I bet there's a documentary on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it could be.
It's funny because you mentioned Oliver Twist, and I read it again about 4 years ago, and it was so sad.
It's so sad. It's so utterly tragic, and it wasn't written to be turned into a musical.
Yeah, he hated it, didn't he? I'd imagine. There's also the idea of when is it a success? Like your criticism of musical theatre, like say using trauma, when has it been a successful project? And I investigate the word, the musical London Road. Put that down as a bit of an investigative.
Oh, what's that? London Road?
London Road. It's a musical about 13, 12 years ago. and it's about the community in Ipswich, on the road that they caught, whose name I cannot remember now, who killed the women in Ipswich. He was killing the prostitutes, the rapist. Can't remember his name. It got lost back there. But then when everybody thought, what, there's a musical about that? And you went and saw it and you're like, oh, it's about the road and how they cope with all of the trauma and how they kind of get the community back. It's beautiful. And what they do is they musicalize the verbatim recordings from the town. It's brilliant. And also check out Come From Away as well. Come From Away is about the Canadian town where all the planes had to land on 9/11, and suddenly this small town in Canada had to cope with something like 8,000 people from different cultures and communities and couldn't speak, etc. It's how the town coped. It's not about 9/11. It's set on the same day. 9/11 is not even mentioned. It's a musical, and it's written by the people from the town. So yeah, so challenge your own thing. When am I wrong? You know, it's that. It's worth going down that road, because at some point somebody will come up to you and go, hey, Jane, actually, I'd say Come From Away does it. You've got to be able to know the other side, as it were. Because I get it with Kennedy a lot. You know, especially conspiracy theories, I get it a lot every time. Somebody coming up with a biography in front of me and going, yeah, but you didn't mention that. It's like, yeah, because I chose not to. Okay. Number 3, how big is your project moving forward? This, I've kind of touched on this a little bit, and I'm going to flirt back with it later on, but the things that are getting programmed now are financial. The finances behind it are most certainly becoming a consideration. You can see it even in the heavily funded spaces. They're balancing their shows now. They're big shows, maybe with 20 people in the cast. And suddenly they're just going back to 2 people in a cast, even the National, because for that season they'll save money. So be realistic with what you make. Be realistic in the fact that if you do get asked to go to a larger theatre, your project can cope. If you go to a town hall, or in my case, a snooker room, can it cope? Will it be okay? And I think I probably automatically do that anyway, because I know that for the most part, it's me traveling around with a big suitcase, plus I'm using my own money. So you don't want to put all of your love into something and it never really have the possibility. Of course, there's flukes. There are the flukes out there that you'll just suddenly send your project to a writing initiative or whatever, and who knows, it will get picked up. Who knows? Just have a think about it. Judge the room. Judge the room of where your project is, what it's about, where does it live, where do you live, where do you want it to go, etc., etc. It sounds like you've all kind of got a hand on it. You know, JB Priestley's probably got quite a big reach, and there's a bit of a brand thing going on in there that might be interesting, that a lot of programmers might go, oh, JB Priestley will sell. And then that kind of gets a bit of a way in. I think I probably get that with Kennedy a little bit. But if yours is a personal project, you've also got to find your way in a little bit to make them realize it counts. Because the confusion of, is an evening without Kate Bush a gig? Or what is it? Is that a concert? Is it a tribute act? What is it? And so, yeah, so think about where it lives and also the size of it. And twice I've been asked to make the show bigger. So we used to have an hour version of Julie Maddie Deeply and an hour version of Neither Without Kate Bush. But because it's going to bigger spaces, they want an interval so they earn money on the drinks, which is fair. That's the way it goes. So then, but we have to go back and make another 40 minutes, which is not something you want to do when you've crafted a perfect 60-minute thing. But thankfully, the 2 of us have done it before with Julie Maddie Deeply, and I'm very proud of this 2-act version. In fact, it's better. And then that was weird, and I wasn't expecting it. So know that sometimes the jostling of your project may have to happen in relation to trying to get it staged. Okay. How much time do you need? Now, this is a thing I try to tell students this a lot. Don't book anywhere until you've started to really get your teeth into something. I just don't. I think sometimes we run too quickly. I've realized I'm a slow theatre maker. I think it's now going to have to be an art form, because my new cabaret I'm doing at the moment, I've been working on it. By the time it goes out, I've been working on it 15 months. And that's probably about 1 day a week, which in a whole year or whatever, that's, you know, whatever, how many days, 60 days or something, which is probably, say, 2 months plus, which is generally what the National Royal Court will do to develop and put on a show. So give yourself loads of time, which is why I do multiple projects, because it's all about the cooking on the hob. You put this one on boil, you put this one on simmer, and then sometimes you're going to take that one down, you're going to put this one up, and then you're going to put another couple of things for later on. So I've got a Santa Claus show that I've started to think about, and I've kind of got the performer we're going to work on, and it's not going to be next year, it might be the year after, but that is on a really, really low light. And just occasionally we send each other documentaries or books, and it's like, yeah, it's coming, one day it's coming. Really fascinated about making a show about the person who is Santa Claus. But that's later. And, you know, off I go and I leave it till then. But just don't run too quickly, because you don't want to damage your project. You want, the first time you let it out, you want to be fulfilled and you want to learn from it, etc., and you must give yourself enough time to do everything. And I would say the biggest thing I see across the board that people don't give enough time to, and I say people, this is a very sweeping statement, is writing. It's writing. I think that's the big hurdle a lot of new theatre falls. The first hurdle is writing. That the skill and the art of writing. I know I'm preaching to the converted here, but I just be careful when you're writing. And it depends how you're making your piece. Are you devising your piece before you write it, or you're writing it and then putting it out there as a rehearsal piece? Georgie, maybe you're in the theatre making writing process that way and that way and that way. But Jane, I'd imagine you're more writing first and then going on. Okay. So yeah, have a think about it. Give yourself time. I'd say we've got 6 weeks to go before we're on stage. We've now started to feel quite secure in the script and the songs, etc. We've got our outfits, we've got our photos, we've done all the type of media stuff. Now we're really putting it on its feet because the pressure is coming of the performances. And now it feels like, oh yeah, this is almost the dress rehearsal period before we actually go into the theatre itself, where tech takes over. So it's the same process, but just because you're independent, it's sometimes a lot longer. And that's fine. And think about another project for 2 years maybe, and then you've got more stuff bobbling away, and then it's that idea of just keep making, you know, activity, just keep doing stuff, keep doing, you know, it's keep moving, isn't it? Okay. And this one is really, really important. So Jane, this might be useful to you. I think one of the things you were saying, it's like, where do you want to frame the story? Where does it start? And where does it end? You may not know the answer to this yet.
No, I don't.
But you need to, as the maker of this show, you have to at some point put your flag in the sand and go, where should this story start and where should it end? Sometimes I think there's the initial, I'm just going to research everything and do everything. So with Kennedy, I did that, obviously researched every single aspect of his life. Then I put it all on the wall. And then it took me quite a while to realize that Bobby was quite dull until JFK died. Now, why dull? I mean theatrically. Don't think he's that interesting before. And I say it in the show. I think I can't remember what the line is now. It's a laugh, isn't it? I say, but if you're honest, you're only here to watch this show because of my brother, or you're only here because of my brother. And then I say, and so am I. And that kind of gets a bit of a giggle, because they realize what I'm saying is that actually Robert really only came into real, you know, public focus after JFK had been shot. And so that's what I knew I had to start with, really. I actually have to get rid of JFK within the first 10 minutes. But I have to have it in it, because really it's the show me the money line. The audience have come for Kennedy, folklore, legend, everything. They've come for the lot. And then I had, as the theatre maker, I was like, how can I stage JFK's death on stage with just me? And I knew that's kind of like the opening has to start with the Kennedy mania. have to have that. They want to see the flags, they want to see the posters, they want to see, oh, they want the sexiness, they want the 60s. Yeah, let's tick all those boxes straight away and then kill JFK. That's the point. Because in theory, you try to recreate the euphoria and devastation of his death. Like killing a president is like killing our king. It's a a seismic event in America. The president is king or queen one day, hopefully. So think about where you need to start your story, where you need to end. And then a caveat to that is, what do you have to include? What's the things you must have in this story? Like that are immovable, either for you or for the people who paid a ticket, because the audience have come for a reason. And you don't want to be too much of an editor in some ways, because it's got to be entertaining, right? I had to include Martin Luther King and his death, because Bobby gave a speech after his death. It has to go in. I have to unveil more about his life and his children, because they were super important to him. That was important to me, because I had to flesh him out, because the public needed to engage with the fact he was so good and loved with his wife and his children. It's like, that has to be out there, because people presume Bobby was somehow corrupt and having affairs with Marilyn Monroe and all this. And he just gets whirled up in all of the, rubbish conspiracies. And I was like, no, I've got to put my flag in the sand here, because I've done my research, and I'm going to be brave and do this. So that's my ego. Then what else do I have to put in? I have to address the Vietnam War. I have to address civil rights, because it's all that period. So when by the end I inadvertently start my show in 1963 and I finish it in 1968, because that's the year he died. And then there's a peppering of my own life, because I played him in a documentary in 2013. And that's the kind of almost modern take on what I made, which throws people off, which is good, because they don't expect me to stop the show and talk about when I played him on TV. And it's nice, because it keeps them on their toes. And that's going back to make a modern piece of theatre. Any current thoughts? Anyone just got time for one thought from anybody or question on this area before we move on? Don't worry if you haven't.
No. No, loads to think about.
Okay, cool. Moving on. Right. Oh, quiz time. Just to rank it up. I say quiz, it's one question. So I've got a question here. Attendance for in-person arts and heritage has risen since spring 2022. True or false? Have a think for a moment. I'll leave that up there.
I'm not sure I understand what the question means.
So basically, have people been going to live arts more? Has it, attendance for in-person arts and heritage has risen since spring 22. Is that true or false, do you think?
False.
Okay, Jane says false.
Yeah.
Robert, sorry?
I mean, from your description, it sounds possibly true.
Mm-hmm. Georgie?
Yeah, I think true, but only marginally.
Interesting. I've been learning loads in the past 6 months. It's true.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes if you look at the atmosphere, it doesn't feel like it is. Yeah. Now, what's really interesting is that's the increase.
Wow.
So it's gone up 20%. And again, I was checking all this online this morning with other companies, with West End research groups and everything. Like, people are back at live arts. They really, really are. You can see down there, if you want to look at that, it's called theaudienceagency.org. You can always look at that. It's really, really useful as a maker of theatre, that you're aware of these shifts in the zeitgeist. Now, I've thought about this. In fact, I'm going to come to that in a minute. Right, have a look at this. This is kind of the audience share at the moment. Movies are back. Now, it's a little bit unfair to compare film, because my friend who works in cinema always tells me how many cinemas are closing. So there are so many cinemas. It's almost, I never know what the context of the research of this result is, because the cinema's reach is huge. But anyway, that's kind of like audience share really, really easy cod way of looking at it. But all I'm worried about is maybe the second one and then the fourth one and the fifth one. And I'll send this to you, by the way. I should have said this. I'm going to send all this on a PDF document after the session at some point, so you'll get to really study it. But there's loads of stuff out there. And the running theme is live arts is most certainly back. And it was about what I said to you about my producer friend, that they said that audiences want to interact. Those are things that she's finding are selling better. Anything that she does, especially cabarets. And I think that's true. I believe it. I see it in the room, even when I watch my own work or I'm sat in the audience and even with AK Bush, like, people are up for it. They just want to live. And theatre is about living. It's live, it's with people, it's breath, it's music, it's connection, it's tears, it's happiness. It's that. I had one guy in Bath cry within the first 3 minutes of Bobby Kennedy last week, from America. And then he cried at the end, and he came up to me at the end and he says, "You just brought it all back." He said, "I was 5 and my mother just collapsed on the floor when she got the phone call that Bobby had been shot." And I was like, "Oh, good." And I gave him a hug, and he was just like, "I just love it." And I thought afterwards, like, he didn't expect that tonight. He just, lives in Bath, and he came and he took a punt on this show, and I was like, "Oh, I'm so happy that I did that." And, I think everybody's empathy has been shifted in the past 3 or 4 years in whatever way. And I find it fascinating that people are really, really back. Okay. This one's the one I was going to raise, which I'm raising now. A new international study of ticket sales, revenue, and audience demographics for the performing arts shows a switch towards younger bookers in the wake of the pandemic. The 2 years on survey conducted by TRG Arts and Purple 7 looked at the sector in North America, the UK, and the Republic of Ireland in 2020 and 21. Growth was greatest among Gen X and Gen Y in the UK and US respectively, with a dip, those aged 55 to 75. In the UK, baby boomers, those born between the 40s and 60s, remain the largest generation, but the proportion of bookers has fallen by 3%. The greatest growth since 2019 has been in Gen X and those between 65 and 80. In the UK in 2021, there's a higher proportion of all ages of bookers under 60, but the average age of bookers was just 1 point a year lower in 2020, etc., etc. Now, I feel this, and it wasn't until I read this all this week, I was like, yeah. And I was teaching some students on Thursday morning. I told them this fact, and they just nodded. Like, yeah, we know. And it's true. It's really, really true. Young people are actually keeping the arts alive in so many ways, especially experimental work, especially new writing. They're kind of over the legacy projects. Shakespeare is not done in Edinburgh in the way it was 10 years ago. The ground has really, really shifted. And that's something to note. And you take it wherever you like. It's not to say that obviously there is not space for your show. I know that if I could put my Kennedy show in front of students I taught at Guildford, they would love it. But I couldn't get it in there because it's seen as an old project. So I'd have to get past the firewalls of the lecturers because it's an old dude from the 60s. But actually, whatever, I'm not going to play that game with them. But know that that is a thing. Gen X and Y are absolutely in love with live arts. And so as a producer and as a writer, I think there might be something in you saying to yourself, right, how am I going to connect? How am I going to make this relevant for them? And if that, fills you with horror, I would say then start to expose yourself to something that is being seen by that generation. What is the hot ticket? And you'll get to know what is working, what isn't working, and blah, blah, blah. And I think for the most part, there's a huge passion for theatre that will address what's going on in the world: money, climate, class, power, authority. They're incredibly politically minded. And I can say this as a Gen Xer that although I didn't live in the 60s, I'd still lived in the 70s and 80s. And I do believe that the young are as political as the 60s and 70s teenagers were. They are nicer. I think that, and they're more connected, and they're much more educated than we ever were. But they are really politically minded, incredibly savvy. They don't want to riot, they don't want to fight, but they will do something about it. However that will manifest, I don't know.
Do you think it's more single issue, considerably less party based?
Absolutely. I think it's empathy. I think they just want to come together. They don't care who you are, what you are, where you come from, anything. It's like we are one race and we're humans, and let's just look out for each other. I can really feel it. And I work with under 25s a lot. Of course, I'm being sweeping statement here, but I've felt it. I really like this generation. They're full of love and hope, but they're very, very pissed off with political stuff, and they're really on it as well. They corrected me the other day on a prime minister from the 20s, and they went, actually, he was Labour. I was like, all right, which is great. Okay, right, moving on. But remember, you're also writing for that audience now because they're about to take over. Now, let's move back to creative stuff very briefly. Thinking theatrically is kind of a question I'm still always considering. Like, what is a theatrical act? And because I jump between being a performer and a director and a writer, I think I've learned what a theatrical act is mostly through my directing, because I get given a script and then I have to translate that world to a performer. And that inside that is what we call direction. And the theatricality is the thing I have to keep an eye on, which is the audience experience, I guess, the experience of what is on the page, putting onto the stage, the cliche. But but when I'm a maker, when I'm actually just by myself with my box of props, I just try to make it physical as well as verbal, as much as possible. Because for the most part, theatre is a physical art form. Of course, it can be a verbal art form. Of course, there are monologues that last 2 hours. Of course, there are. But for the most part, I think it's safe to say that theatre is a visual, physical performance mode. And when I'm directing, I make sure the physical information is communicating the script, not the actors just saying the lines. And I probably discovered it more about 20 years ago, and I thought every time I do a scene, there has to be something in it physically. It gives it more game. And I remember just doing one scene once in a musical. I'm thinking, well, this is a bit boring. They're just sitting around talking. I was like, right, I'm going to try and get her to undo her shoelaces or something, or put a sock on. And she just can't do it. But it's not even in the script. But I said, no, I want you to try and deliver that 3-minute speech while you're still trying to put your sock on. But every time you put it on backwards. Just something like that, just to keep like mucking around with it. So there's something else going on. So she's got something to push against. The audience are fascinated by what's going on and also listening. For me, that's a theatricality. What's the word? Attempt. And it's the classic Peter Brook line of a person walks across the stage, and that is a theatrical act because it raises questions. Then as a writer, I then really hold myself to account on what my stage directions are saying. And I make sure I only write down what is useful for the plot, for the energy in the room, for the atmosphere. So I've just done some script consultancy, and a couple of the writers, you can tell that they're trying to direct the actor. And that's not really the writer's job. That's the director and actor in the rehearsal room, which is why I say that in rehearsals, when I'm a director, I tend to be able to spot theatricality, what is required theatrically. And right now, because of the cabaret I'm making, it's very bizarre because there's 2 of us in it and we don't have a director per se. We're self-directing with the 2 of us. But just sometimes I'm able to step back and go, that doesn't make sense. Whereas if I was just sat on the couch judging it, I'd be able to get to it quicker. But now it's always physical or a game or something. A silliness. Theatre itself is just absurd. It's an absurd thing to put in front of somebody. You're just going to start to like create the Kennedy funeral with a box. You know, that's what it is, but that's what the audience love. And a woman texted her friend after she saw Bobby Kennedy. She said, I've got to show you this text I just sent to my friend. And she said, I've just seen a one-man show bury JFK. In 1963, and I don't know how he did it, but I cried. It's like that's theatre, that's theatricality. It's, you know, just what do you need to offer to get the atmosphere, the look of the scene, etc. And then the age-old one again, what is theatre? It's always vibrating around you, which is it's live. It's an audience experience, and the performer must be present. There has to be an illusion of some sorts. And that's obviously heightened performance. That could be anything. You could tell your whole life story if you like, but it's better if it's heightened and dramatically shaped. Any thoughts on these? Feel free to challenge. I will zoom ahead. Okay. So this is why the next note. So when you start to research, put down things. Maybe if you're reading a book, write down the physical things that you find interesting. So if you're reading a biography of the person you're making, on your notebook that is by your side, make a note of things that are physical that could be theatrical. So for instance, right now, I've written down on my Titanic book, I put shoes, because the pictures from the Titanic now, shoes are still on the seabed. And I find that really interesting. And so I'm really fascinated by shoes. And now my theatre brain goes, ooh, if I put 50 pairs of shoes on a stage, that's really loaded. And if I walk in with that, and then I can start to muck around with the shoes. And the shoes can potentially be other characters. Who knows? And that's really, like, for me, that was like the flame lit up. I was like, oh God, that's really straightforward, simple, perfect. And my producer brain went, yeah, and easily fitting in a suitcase because I can travel on the train. And back up. Cool. Can you all still see that? Is that good?
Yeah,
good?
yeah.
Yeah, cool. So this is kind of touched on this already, really, but it's your desired story frame. It starts to come into play at some point, and it's serving you and the person who knows nothing about your show, or the person, and then the people who do know. I always thought about my nephews. I thought if they come and see this, they won't know the hell Bobby Kennedy is, but I want them to have a really good time and go away and go, wow, because they get taught about JFK in schools, they don't get taught about RFK. And that's for me, that's good, because then they've experienced that through theatre. Just to zoom out on the whole profession for a moment, this is a question to the room. What does biographical theatre traditionally look like to you? Days, if you look at what's maybe on advertising in your local theatre, or any thoughts?
No, not really.
Sort of storyline. Normally, the timeline is consistent. Normally, I think.
Yeah, kind of like a linear.
Yeah.
I think it's yeah. I
was going to say, one of the reasons that I was interested in Priestley is that he was very interested in time. And you know, in my piece, I'd intend for there to be some abrupt shifts in time through the prism of him.
Amazing. Yeah. You've got a great vehicle there. Time is part of the culture then, if he was obsessed with time. I think you're right. Yeah. I think there's still a culture out there of a person standing in a costume telling a story. And I believe that those days are going. I think that the taste for it and the audience for that has started to wane. I think you have to keep jostling at what that is, because again, I do it in the writing workshops or talk to students. It's the Wikipedia Live warning. You can't get up there and just tell that anymore. It's becoming old-fashioned. And there was a rural touring network. I won't name the performer of the company, but they started to do a show about Harold Wilson. And this woman in front of me, she went, "Oh God." As soon as he started saying he was born on things, she went, "Oh God." And I thought, yeah, it's mean, I know, but I thought, yeah, because this is kind of, it's been made to, for some reason, there's a little bit of a culture out there. Some people may believe making this type of theatre is easy. because all you have to do is tell stories and tell facts. And there has been an audience for that. But I believe as theatre makers, we should try and, update the system, which is why I've got this here. So there are a couple of modes for you, depending on what you might want to have a look at. So direct address, I would say my Kennedy project lives in direct address, and the next one down, which is a straight play, a little bit. But I have a music focused culture within the show. It's not a musical. I definitely use movement. I don't use monologue, I use speeches. And you could use all of the above if you want to, just in case, because sometimes it might be useful for you to think of your thing as a piece of movement, depending on where your culture comes from. It could be, say, for instance, Jane or Robert, if you wanted to mix up the game, you could actually get a performer first and get them interested in the project and say, hey, should we devise this in the room and I script what we make? Mix up the system. What else could be done? Definitely a possibility. Musicals are very, very different beast, obviously, because of the amount of money and investment and time. So I'm sure you know that anyway, but it's quite a feat, a musical. I wouldn't personally ever make one unless I was given 2 years and lots of money, because they were so difficult to make. And there's a reason why Matilda works, because they were given 18 months and RSC money and Tim Minchin's skill. So they were always onto a winner. But Royal Court National, they wish they had the money to do that, and they just don't have the developmental opportunities in the same way, because the RSC is so wealthy. Okay, just a little sharing of some of my stuff I've shared, looked at with Bobby, and now with Titanic. So I go for books. I go for culture. That could be societal, that could be food, that could be clothes, which takes me down to fashion. Era is definitely important, obviously, however you want to interpret that. So I think with era, mine was focused on the turbulence between 60 to 68, especially the whole Vietnam War thing, and how America's ripping itself apart. Documentaries. YouTube is your mine. Go to YouTube, put your topic in, and put documentary after it, and somebody will have done something. Could be flowers, botanical documentaries, whatever you need to do. JB Priestley documentary. There'll be 10, I bet you. I'm
very interested that his estate is managed by his son.
We're going to get
and
on.
The key question for me is, obviously not right at the beginning, but do I actually make contact? Because I am attempting to produce an honest but friendly piece.
Yeah.
And I'm slightly curious if endorsement is a useful thing.
Yeah, we'll get into that for sure. I've got stuff coming up.
Sorry about that.
No, don't worry. Politics, I think, probably affects every single person, every story, all the time. Whether that's the focus of your show, I don't know, but I think politics is worth researching at all costs. I'm going to learn all about the British political system around the time of the Titanic at some point. Humans in general, just human behavior. We're fascinating little beasts, and that really comes into it. Have opinions that you disagree with. I tried to find loads of conspiracy theories about Kennedy, really dug, super deep diving into what people really think, because when I had to talk to a few of them, I had to know what I was talking about and where they were coming from. I don't want to challenge them, but I do want to be confident in conversations that I have, because Bobby was definitely shot by one person and the person's still alive and he says he did it. And there's all sorts of things. No, there were 6 shooters, and you could just see the video footage of it, and it's like, no, there's just one. There's definitely one, but I can see why you've gone the other way. The country that is set in, always useful. Quotes from the person, or quotes around that era, that time. Quotes about the thing that you're discovering. Found quotes to be super interesting, because if you find the lovely poetical, metaphorical quotes, they just juice you up. You may not feel it directly, but just sometimes a quote nails it, nails your piece. And music, always music, even if you're not going to include it. What's the music of the era like? How to write, we kind of got onto that, really. We've kind of done that one, and those writers set that out. Just this is something to ask yourself now, maybe write down. I had a Bobby question, which I forgot about the other day whilst I was designing this. And mine was, can we spot good leaders? I thought, when are we ever really proud of a leader? When do we ever go, yeah, they were really good? And I just sometimes, and I think to myself, when do I think somebody's good? And I do have an impression about Bobby, and I thought, no, I think he was a good man. He was called the unity candidate because he brought people together. Yes, there's all sorts of things about privilege and all that. There is that in there, but he was a genuine social warrior for that time that he lived in, and in the context of his upbringing, etc., etc. So, and then the question, even before I made the show, was, can we really spot good leaders? And the other one was, why do we need to be led? So think about maybe asking yourself a question that's inside all of this. That you have a question, maybe even about humanity in general, that's related to your topic. You know, why is time important? You know, what is it? Just thinking about yours, Jane. It's like, why are actors important? You know, why do we need actors? Why is an actor auditioned to do the job they do? You know, it's all sorts of fascinating stuff. What's your real personal internal question that's going on? You don't necessarily ever doesn't need to be in your show. And it may come later. It's a self-interrogation, really. Okay, right. Public domain. Fair game. I'm going to describe the situation we have with Julie Maddie Deeply. And I'm going to zoom through these because we are running out of time, literally. Okay. With Julie Maddie Deeply, obviously we are talking about Julie Andrews' life. We are not allowed to say that it is endorsed by Julie Andrews. Her camp know that we exist because we got an email once saying you need to stop, because or you need to send us footage. And thankfully, we had a very strong Australian producer who said, no, we don't, because Julie Andrews' life is in the public domain. Everything is delivered in with love. We adore her, and all the pieces of music fall under the cabaret license. And we never heard from them again, because it's true. If somebody is famous, prolific, their life is in the public domain. Bobby Kennedy's life is in the public domain. Technically, you're in a bit of a grey space in the UK. So if I go to America, I cannot use any of my audio because it's recorded through like an NBC microphone or an ABC microphone. UK, doesn't matter. Nobody's going to spend suing me to use any audio because everybody's too busy living. So just know that if somebody prolific is in the public domain, it's called fair game. But obviously you don't want to be harmful, you want to be respectful, etc., etc. Now, the get out of jail free card we have with Julie Maddie Deeply is she does not play Julie Andrews. She plays a woman who is obsessed with Julie Andrews. So she's not pretending to be Julie Andrews. In fact, so much at the beginning, she says, I am not Julie Andrews. I wish I was. And all the people giggle. And there you go. Off we go. Lots of fun. And even though Kate Bush, we know she's never, ever, ever, ever Kate Bush. But she shows some of the imagery and the audience does the maths themselves. So in terms of answering your question, Robert, I personally wouldn't contact an estate. You make your peace with love and respect. You obviously are passionate about that person. And then I think, you're good to go. It's kind of, you'll learn more and more about the culture once you get into it, and the more and more you research. And I think you'll also, might be worth checking out what the estate is like. Has anybody ever made another show about it? Has their estate ever tried to stop them? You can do what you like, but also, like with Titanic, at some point, once I've got it, I may start to engage with White Star Line. I may do it, because this is my personal project. It's my writing, and I will probably contact someone who I'm going to come up with their photo in a moment. But so yeah, I say green light, but also I do an amber, because also your project may be individual, and you go for your personal research. With you, Jane, I would say use a pseudonym, bury them,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you would anyway, because using somebody personally alive today that
No.
you, etc. But then, you know, you get the, what was a play recently in Wales? It was called something like was it the Murder of Katie Hopkins or something really weird and awful. And I thought, oh God, I wouldn't have never done that. I don't care what you feel about another person. I'd never call my show that. It was something quite like, whoa, you know, the assassination or the killing of, just awful. And I thought, no, don't do that. But you know, whatever, they choose what they want. And then in New York, we had to battle with Disney, with Julie Andrews. And we kind of bowed down because they take the license away. And basically, Sarah Lou could not perform in the costume she used in the UK. She was not allowed to wear a blue dress. She had to wear a black dress. And the laugh is, Julie Andrews does not wear a blue dress in The Sound of Music. It's grey. Anyway, so the stamp of approval thing, do you need it? That's up to you and your project. It can be really useful. Kate Bush, the fan club, which is run by Dave Cross, who we know, puts our show on Kate Bush fan website. That's super important. Kate Bush's fan site isn't very active, but she endorses the fan site. They're called Fish People, and we get the Fish People stamp of approval. And in, I think, 3 weeks' time, we're doing 20 minutes in the evening without Kate Bush at the Terence Higgins Trust, and Kate Bush is going to be there. And you just think, oh gosh, that's okay. And we've had people in her band who played in her band and tour in the 1970s who come and saw it and just like been gushing about it. So we've never sought out the stamp of approval, we've got it. So Brian Cox,
Right.
the actor, who's friends of our circle, he adores An Evening Without Kate Bush, and he gave us the note, and he just says, what you do is pure theatre. He says, it's just you, a couple of props, tell a story, off you go. And he said the same about Julie Mandy Deeply. So you can use these stamp of approvals, and really by the end of it, the icon in the middle, people have come to see Julie Andrews, who know Julie Andrews, and they go, oh, I'll tell her. And you go, yeah, and Julie's making money because they get paid. Right, quickly onto my one before I zoom. We're coming to the last 6 minutes. So this is the dude. I am going to research my Titanic project. A third-class passenger who helped lots of people and also survived. And at the inquiries, which happened literally more or less the next day before the survivors were brought to New York began, he started to tell some real truths about what some of the shipmen were doing with the lifeboats, about how they were discriminating against people from different countries and from languages they didn't understand, particularly Turkish. There was a group of Turkish people, and they didn't let them on because they didn't understand. And again, it's me trying to untangle and undo some of the narrative we've got. And so I'm ready to deep dive into his testimony, because the testimonies are online. The whole thing is online. You can literally read the transcripts from both inquiries in London and New York. And then if I settle on him, I'm going to see if I can find his family. That's the type of contact I would make, because he probably have a granddaughter, great-granddaughter, whatever. And I want to do that. I think I'd be nice. And the good thing is that there's something called the Titanic Society, I think. They have listed every single third-class passenger, and every single one of their biographies is up, like down to where they live. They lived. And even Southampton, there's an interactive Southampton map where you click on a road and it just suddenly shows how many people died on that road, because Southampton was obviously incredibly hit by the death rate. So yeah, so that case, if I decide I'm going to do it, I'm going to contact August's family and see. Yeah, because having the endorsement is nice. It's nice to have the endorsement. UK law, very briefly. UK law is a little bit grey for theatre. Usual thing, which I think I've touched on with you three before, PRS, if you use music that is in the background, that's fine. That goes under a kind of a background music license, which the theatre has, that you're going into. You won't have to pay anything because it's under the entertainment license of the building. You will have to give them a list of it, probably, and you will just have to say what it is and just say to them it's background music or incidental. But remember, if it's interpopulated, which means it's absolutely intrinsic to the script, you're then talking about paying thousands of pounds. So what's my advice? Don't use it. just use stuff that is in the background, create an atmosphere, or use it if you've got the money. I don't know, it's up to you, right? But I used the Summer Spandau Ballet in the Vault Festival, and they were lovely. PRS, they realized it was all my money, and I only used 30 seconds, and they charged me 30 quid for the week. And I was really important. I had that song for me, so I was willing to throw 30 quid at it. It's all right. It's nice to have that in it. So yeah, think about that, because the UK is thankfully a grey area in this. But if you go to New York, it's different. And there was a reverse situation recently. A guy had a show called Diana. It was done in New York, and it was all about Diana's interview. There was, remember, back in the 90s. And when he came here, he didn't realize until he got here and the show was opening that he couldn't perform it because the BBC stopped him using it because he'd crossed over the ocean. And so he had to do this weird hybrid version of his show, and he got terrible reviews because he made it up and it was unwritten and it wasn't the show that we'd bought a ticket for. And so somebody somewhere had not done their research about licensing. So think about that, because he could not use any of her words in this country because he literally based it on that interview with that strange bloke, whoever it was. Okay, quick one. What is a plot? These are lovely definitions for later for your writing. A series of causes and effects which shape the story as a whole. And then Ian Forster said this lovely thing. This is what a plot is. The king died and then the queen died is a story. The king died and then the queen died of grief is a plot. Think about that. Let it fester. And there is a little bit of a difference.